Hey guys, and welcome to Anchor to Truth. Tonight we are studying part 1 of chapter 6 in the book of Jubilees. So let's get started.
All right, chapter 6, beginning in verse 1, it says, "And on the new moon of the 3rd month, he went forth from the ark and built an altar on the mountain. And he made atonement for the earth and took a kid and made atonement by its blood for all the guilt of the earth. For everything that had been on it had been destroyed, save those that were in the ark with Noah."
So let me ask you guys this. We just ended chapter 5. We have a timeline of where we're at. What are y'all's thoughts on the new moon of the 3rd month? He went forth from the ark and built an altar on that mountain, and he made atonement for the earth. So what are we talking about here?
Actually, when we're reading this, what I'm looking at here is Noah is acting as a priest at this moment. And that makes me think, well, if he's acting as a priest at this moment with the sacrifice of the kid, of the guilt offering, that there may have been, Abba's laws may have been before Mount Sinai. What do you think? Yeah, so that we see, and this is something that we've talked about before in other settings, but my personal belief is that the laws that were given to Moses or Moshe on Mount Sinai from Abba were laws that are already in place from the very beginning. These aren't anything that's new. Right. As we see through Abraham is working as a high priest when he does the sacrifice on the altar. We see now Noah, way before Abraham, doing the same thing, that he is actually in the place of a high priest here, given of a guilt offering. It says here in verse 2, it says, "And he made atonement for the earth." And it says, "And he took a kid and made atonement by its blood for all the guilt of the earth, for everything that had been on it had been destroyed, save those that were in the ark with Noah." So, yeah, I think that's a key thing to pull right at the very beginning of this chapter. Is a key thing to look at is Noah is in the position of a priest at this moment. Let's pick up in verse 3. It says, "And he placed the fat thereof on the altar, and he took an ox and a goat and a sheep and kids and salt and a turtle dove and the young of a dove, and placed a burnt sacrifice on the altar, and poured thereon an offering mingled with oil and sprinkled wine, and strewed frankincense over everything, and caused a goodly savor to arise, acceptable before Yahuwah."
So is this our first recipe that we're giving?
Sounds like it.
It sounds delicious.
A little salt,
I bet it smelt amazing.
Right?
So anyway, let's pick up in verse 4. It says, "And Yahuwah smelt the goodly savor, and he made a covenant with him, and that there should not be any more a flood to destroy the earth, that all the days of the earth, seed time and harvest, should never cease, cold and heat, and summer and winter, and day and night should not change their order nor cease forever." Some believe that when the flood took place, it had knocked everything out of whack, because there's been a discussion about calendars and about days, and how was God's perfect calendar 360, and then we have these extra days that they're going to add in. And some people will say that during the flood, that when everything was busting loose, that things just happened to get out of whack. But here we're reading that God's saying right here in verse 4, he's not going to destroy the earth anymore by floodwaters, and that all the days of the earth, seed time and harvest, should never cease, cold and heat, in summer and winter, and day and night should not change their order. So according at least to Jubilees, there was nothing that was, knocked out of whack or made the sun have to stay out a day longer as it goes around the earth and all that stuff. And what it's saying to me here is that God kept everything in time, and he's saying specifically here for us to understand that nothing's changed. The seasons are still the same, the sun and the moon, everything that's what I call the inner clockworks of the earth, nothing's changed. It's all still in the same time, the same beat and everything. What do you guys think?
I think that's a great point to bring up, because that tells us exactly that everything is according to his order, that it is exactly where it needs to be. I think that's a great point.
Yeah, and at the very end it says, and about their order, it says, "Nor cease forever."
Well, and that language of forever is exactly the same as like talking about the different covenants and the law and the different things that we read about in the canon, where it says this is a statute forever, or this is a law for all people forever. So we get God is full of forevers, and essentially he's saying, if I establish something or I say something, then my word's bond, and I'm going to hold myself to it, which we're partakers of his word, but he holds himself accountable. We don't get to hold him accountable. We're not going to sit around and say, well, God, this winter was a little colder than last winter. What's going on? He's like, don't worry about it. I got it. You're little, I'm big. And actually, you know, that cold winter was really to help your spring or whatever, right? Because he's fully sovereign and knows what's best for us as people. So, you know, while I'm agreeing with you guys, I actually had something I pulled out a little different than the calendar and stuff like that. It was more of the whole climate change and, you know, all these initiatives that are going out and like, oh, we have to save the earth because we're going to burn up. We have to save the earth because we're going to nuclear freeze or whatever. All this conjecture, all these words, all these scientific terms of seemingly made up stuff, really, because it says there's going to be a new heaven and a new earth. There's going to be a time when God comes down to tabernacle. There's going to be all these future prophesied events. So the earth will be here for those future events to happen. So we can't kill all ourselves off. We can't destroy the earth to the point where it's irredeemable. And he's saying there's going to always be cold and heat. So unless we just have 4 winters in a row and call God a liar, then God's true. And what it says here is there's going to be cold and heat, seed time and harvest. These things are just going to perpetually happen forever. And no plastic straws are going to stop that from happening.
Right.
That's right.
All right. And verse 5 says, and you increase ye and multiply upon the earth and become many upon it, and be a blessing upon it. The fear of you and the dread of you I shall inspire in everything that is on the earth and in the sea. It says, well, of course, we get the command here to increase and multiply upon the earth. It's common sense. This is why I go, well, we're starting over with 8 people. I've destroyed everything because of the way people were. It says that men's thoughts were continuously upon evil. So when I'm reading this, the first thing that comes to me, it says, and be a blessing. You know, when we're doing the blessing of the children every Shabbat, one of the things we say at the very end is that children go and be blessed, but also be a blessing. You know, let the light of Christ shine in and through you in your life. Let other people see something that's different, you know, the whole 9 yards. And for here is saying, hey, be fruitful and multiply. And by the way, when you do this, and I know that this seed's going to grow, I know that we're going to get to the point where there's going to be a lot more people on this earth. So by the way, while you're doing this, how about let's be a blessing on top of that? Let's don't have the same thing occurring that happened before. All right, let's pick up in verse 6. It says, and behold, I have given unto you all beasts and all winged things and everything that moveth on the earth and the fish in the waters and all things for food. Interesting. It says, as the green herbs, I have given you all things to eat. What do you think about that? He has given us all things, brother. It says it right there. Something happened after Noah where we can just eat whatever we want to, right?
No.
Man, we're being so hopeful, though, man. It's like, come on, no.
Right. So this is the type of thing that people read into, obviously.
Yeah.
And behold, I have given unto you all beasts and all winged things and everything that moveth on the earth and the fish in the waters and all things for food as the green herbs. I have given you all things to eat. Okay, so just surface level reading this, you already had this mentality that it's okay to eat anything. You can read that and just pass right by it and think the same thing. However, and behold, I have given unto you all beasts and all winged things and everything that moveth on the earth and the fish in the waters. So right here, this and behold, that's a thought. And all winged things, that's a thought. And everything that moves on the earth, that's a thought. And the fish in the waters. It's like separate statements in one sentence. I have given you this. 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 So instead of repeating, I have given you this, I have given you this, I have given you this, he says, and, right? So we've got a separation here. It's as if it could be different sentences. Remember, in the original, we had no punctuation, we had no periods, we had no commas, we had none of that, right? So we have to look at the text and compare to what the rest of the scriptures say, not just within this book, but within the many books that we have, and compare that and see, does this absolutely say that we can eat anything that we want to eat? And I would say absolutely not. There's a separation right here. It says, and all things for food as the green herbs. So wait a minute, we have a separation. We don't have an and anymore. We've got an as. And all things for food. So that's a separate thought from what we were just talking about. And it's going to describe that as the green herbs. I have given you all things to eat. So we have a description here. And we're told that every seed-bearing herb is to be as our food and our medicine. Right? Does that mean you can eat any portion of any plant out there and live?
No.
No. And for those people who think that this is a justification that you can just go and eat any animal you want to, do you really think it's safe to eat any and every kind of animal that there is?
I would say no again.
I would say no too, because there's some things that if you eat, it is going to kill you, period.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Right? So so we have to be kind of use some wisdom in this, because either God is saying all things are okay to eat, but if you eat something and it kills you, then that means God's word isn't true.
That's right.
Or maybe we just don't understand what is being said because we're putting our own thoughts, we're forecasting our own ideas onto what the word's saying. So if we read it in context, if we read it for what it's saying, how it's separated, all that stuff, you can see that it's not saying, he's saying, I've given you all these things and I've given you the green herbs. Now, some would also take this in a separate direction and say, well, see, this is saying we don't eat animals. We're only supposed to eat plants, but that's not what it's saying. So I think if we continue reading, we might get a little bit more detail here.
So I thought it was important for us to go to this place, because there are those who would read this and say, you know what? Well, it says it right here. And didn't Yeshua even say at one point he declared all foods clean? So we won't go there tonight with that one, but but I thought it was interesting because that's where you could read into this and go, well, see right here. But then it's like, is God changing his mind back and forth? Because when we do get to Mount Sinai, when we do get to where he sits down with the children of Israel, and he sits down with them and says, oh, by the way, don't eat these. Right. Well, it's kind of going against what he said here, because after Noah, he's like, hey, man, everything's cool to eat. But Kyle, just like you alluded to, there is fish in the sea. I don't remember the name of the fish, but I know it's a Japanese dish, or it's probably all over the Asian world. There's
a puffer fish, I think.
Yeah, it's something where you have to. It takes a skilled chef to cut out around this fish, because one little piece of it is so deadly. If you eat it, you're probably gonna die.
You're dead. Yeah.
You're dead. But anyway, so I thought that was a good point to bring up, that we have to go back into the context of what's being said here. Not only that, if Noah is operating as a role of a priest here, he's doing this atonement, or he's doing this atonement for the earth, and he's doing this sacrifice, and then it goes down, and there's some things in here where it says mingle with oil and sprinkle with wine. And guys, we can go right back to the directions that was given to Aaron at the time with Moshe, and God saying, hey, when you do this, you're gonna there's gonna be a wine offering or a drink offering. There's gonna be all these different offerings that's taking place. Again, it's not a new thing. But God's having to re-instruct the Levitical priesthood in the way that he wants them to carry out his sacrifices and different things. So anyway, I don't want to spend too much time on that, but I just thought it was important to kind of hit that, to see that common sense should rule in here. And that God didn't change his mind later down the road. Oh, by the way, I said it was all good, but it really ain't. Don't eat these things. They're not good for you. That's then we're serving a God who's double-minded. And we know what the word says about a double-minded man. He's like a wave is tossed to and fro, and that's not the God that we serve. So
that's right.
All right, so let's pick up in verse 7 here. It says, but flesh with the life thereof, with the blood, ye shall not eat, for the life of all flesh is in the blood, lest your blood of your lives be required. At the hand of every man, at the hand of every beast, I shall require the blood of man. Whoso sheddeth man's blood, by man shall his blood be shed. For in the image of Elohim made he man. In verse 9 it says, and you increase ye and multiply on the earth. And Noah and his sons swore that they would not eat any blood that was in any flesh. And he made a covenant before Yahuwah Elohim forever throughout all the generations of the earth in this month. Verse 11 says, and on this account he spake to thee, that thou shouldest make a covenant with the children of Israel in this month upon the mountain with an oath, and that thou shouldest sprinkle blood upon them because of all the words of the covenant which Yahuwah made with them for how long? Forever.
As I'm kind of reading through this little portion here, it's a lot. Not to get into every single detail, because we could probably just stop and go 30 minutes on each verse here. But in 7, it starts off talking about the blood and where the life comes from the blood. And we're going to see this thematically played out just over and over and over again, all the way through the death of Yeshua, all the way through, the life of man, and just, the God's design for man, because it goes on to say that Elohim made he man, and that we're in the image of Elohim. So, interestingly enough, it took the blood of Yeshua to even begin the process of atonement for him to enter into that priestly role in heaven as we speak, and allowing us our sins to be forgiven and to mediate for us on our behalf. So we're seeing just so many connections throughout. As we're moving on, right? We see in 10 where it talks about, and he made a covenant before Yahuwah Elohim forever. What's interesting to me on that one is Noah, seemingly, at least the way it's written, Noah initiated this covenant back to the Father. And then later on, we go down and it in verse 11, where it talks about make a covenant with the children of Israel on this month upon the mountain, and you should sprinkle the blood upon them. The first time I read that, I was like, what? You're putting blood on people? That sounds crazy. And then, you read it again in the Bible, in the canon, and you see that same story happening with Moses. And it's a part of that, hey, we're all joined together. We all enter this covenant and agreement together. And it's like a physical sign of that. And I love that God uses physical signs for us. We're people, right? We live a short amount of time. Everything we do has to have some tangibility or we don't get it. If we can't see it, touch it, feel it, taste it, use any of our senses to engage with it, it's almost not real to us. Right. You hear some people talk about the future. You hear some people talking about destiny, hope, faith, something we can't touch and feel. Those are the biggest areas we struggle with. Well, it's unattainable. Well, just because you can't touch it today doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Like faith, God tells us, that's the substance, right? It's stuff we're looking for. We're living in the shadow, but what's to come is the real. And so in order to help us understand those things, like what's in heaven, the tabernacle, the priest, the system, all the things that we're seeing here on earth, he gives us those as examples and to engage with us. And so we can understand more intimately what's going on. We get children to help understand what it's like to have a son and, say, hey, we have a God that gives, or if you have a person that gives good gifts, well, how much more will the Father give even better gifts? So we have these just so many. I mean, I guess I could go on forever on how many ways that God's trying to show his character and his mentality and his thought process through physical and tangible things that's the way we would understand it. It's not for him, it's for us. And I mean, man, what an awesome God that he puts that there for us. Like Sabbath, for instance. Sabbath is not for God. He said, I made Sabbath for man. Come on, guys. I'm doing this for you to help you understand what rest is. You don't even know that you need it. I know you need it. So I'm going to set you up with it.
Right.
And we thank Abba every Shabbat for the Sabbath. All right, let's pick back up in verse 12. It says, and this testimony is written concerning you that you should observe it continually, so that you should not eat on any day any blood of beasts, of birds, or cattle during all the days of the earth. And the man who eateth the blood of the beast, or blood of beast, or of cattle, or of birds during all the days of the earth, he and his seed shall be rooted out of the land. Verse 13 says, and do thou command the children of Israel to eat no blood, so that their names and their seed may be before Yahuwah, our Elohim, continually. Verse 14, it says, and for this law there is no limit of days, for it is forever. They shall observe it throughout their generation, so that they may continue supplicating on your behalf with blood before the altar every day. And at the time of morning and evening, they shall seek forgiveness on your behalf perpetually before Yahuwah, that they may keep it and not be rooted out.
First of all, there is no limitations of days for this law. It is forever, right? Throughout their generations, so that they, well, who is they? Is that the Jews? At this point, there is no Jew. The Jew hadn't existed yet. So this is everything that comes after the generation of Noah. That means all of us.
Every one of us.
Correct. It doesn't matter your ethnicity. It doesn't matter your origin of birth. It doesn't matter your past religion. It doesn't matter any of that. None of that matters.
It doesn't matter who's your daddy and what does he do.
That's right. That's right. It is for everybody all the time. But the other thing is, one of the things that concerns me about this is there's a lot of traditions that have become really prevalent that are kind of gross, but we don't really realize what we're doing with some of these traditions is we're actually cursing our children. I know one of the things that, I'm sorry, this might be a little gross, but one of the traditions when I became of age and I started hunting, and my dad was teaching me how to hunt and that sort of things. One of the first things that as a tradition was this is your first kill. One of the traditions was to cut out and eat the heart, or at least take a bite out of it, right? Raw. Not even cook it.
Well, it's a rite of passage is what we were told when we were younger, is if you, as a young man killing your first deer, this is what you were going to do.
And even though that is a clean animal, we're doing something very unclean with it. Even taking and smearing the blood on the face and, you know, all that stuff. Yes, it was seen as a rite of passage, but that tradition of man is, do we really stop and think about the curses that we are putting on our children for these types of things? And if they continue that and teach that to their children as a rite of passage.
Well, you know, Kyle, and yours was eating the heart with, I've never done this, thank God. But here where I live out in South Carolina, the rite of passage when a young man or a young lady would kill their first deer, it wasn't eating or taking a bite of the heart. They would actually get a cup of blood as they drained it out of the deer. And while it was still warm, and you would have to drink some of that blood. That was, so you literally were drinking the blood. And so that was strictly against what we're reading right now. Not to do these things.
And you don't even have to go to Jubilees to see this. I mean, that's plainly stated in the 66th, you know.
Oh, it's in the Torah,
yeah. All over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
well, I'm glad I didn't grow up here with you guys.
Oh, trust me, it's done all over the earth.
All everywhere. All right, guys, let's pick back up in verse 15. It says, and he gave to Noah and his sons a sign that there should not again be a flood on the earth. He set his bow in the cloud for a sign of the eternal covenant, that there should not again be a flood on the earth to destroy it all the days of the earth. Verse 17 says, for this reason it is ordained and written on the heavenly tables that they should celebrate the Feast of Weeks in this month once a year, to renew the covenant every year. All right, guys, and in verse 18 it says, and this whole festival was celebrated in heaven from the day of creation till the days of Noah, 26 jubilees and 5 weeks of years. And Noah and his sons observed it for 7 jubilees and 1 week of years, till the day of Noah's death. And from the day of Noah's death his sons did away with it until the days of Abraham, and they ate blood.
Down here at the end of verse 18, it basically says they observed all of this until Noah's death, but basically after Noah died, they did away with all that stuff. They're like, all right, Noah's dead, we don't have to do none of that mess anymore. We're going to go back to doing what we want to do. And then they ate blood. Like they're just completely going against it. They're like, all right, Noah's no longer here. You know, we're not being watched, so we can do what we want to do.
Well, it's almost like, what's the practicality there? You know, it's almost like, but the way I read it, because at first I was just like, oh, okay, well, they just changed their beliefs, they just changed what they, held strong to. But it almost reads in like almost in defiance. Now that Dad's gone, I'm gonna do the one thing he said don't do. I mean, it's not like they had a bazillion rules right now. So far, they said, be in covenant with me, do this Feast of Weeks, don't eat blood. It didn't even really give them all the rules of the animals and what to eat, not to eat. I'm sure that was already given to them. That's how they knew what was clean and unclean. But we don't see that long list of rules and things and ways to engage. It was just, hey, don't eat the blood. And it was like, as soon as Dad died, oh yeah, we're gonna go eat the blood. It's like,
we gotta try this.
Yeah, was it in defiance? Was it on purpose? It just seems really odd that would be like, well, yeah, we know that wasn't good, but we're going to do it just because we can. I don't know. It just felt weird the way that it was interjected into the story that way. And I wonder what their thought process was, other than, hey, just like mankind, we're going to test our limits and see what the other side of the grass is like.
Yep.
And let me ask you guys this. This is where my thought kind of goes with this also, because we're taught in this walk that in that Shem was in the role of a high priest. So if Shem was in the role of a high priest, then why would he be doing something that went against the law of Abba? So was Shem truly, and look, there's some calendar, I wouldn't say so much calendar, but there's some timeline when you go through the Masoretic and the Septuagint. The Masoretic would have you believe that Shem was alive all the way up until, Abraham, Isaac, probably Jacob, possibly. But then when we go to the Septuagint, we see that Shem would have passed away well before Abraham was even born. Because one of the things that we're taught in tradition is that Abraham was taught in the tents you know, with Shem and all this stuff, and Shem was a high priest and taught Abraham a lot of these different things. But when we go back to this, we realize maybe Shem wasn't Melchizedek like some believe. Maybe Shem wasn't in the role of a high priest after his father passed away, because if he was in the role of a high priest, he's obviously going against the command of Abba. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, right off rip, I think that's a great analogy and a great interpretation. Something that we can kind of put on the shelf for sure, and like see how that plays out with different verses, and how that plays out as we continue down the biblical narrative of trying to place people in timelines. But yeah, I definitely think this was a direct display of, you know, disobedience right in God's face. You know, so it's interesting, and for sure is unclean. You know, we know that much at least.
Well, I would say if we read on down a little bit further, so let's do this to answer your question. Go ahead and read 19 for us, Joe.
Okay. All right, verse 19 says, "But Abraham observed it, and Isaac and Jacob and his children observed it up to the days. And in thy days the children of Israel forgot it until they celebrated anew on this mountain."
Okay, so right here it says, "But Abraham observed it, and Isaac and Jacob, right, and his children observed it up to thy days." And he's saying up to the days that this has been written.
Mm-hmm.
And in thy days, the children of Israel forgot it until you celebrated it anew on this mountain. So there's a couple of things going on right now. This word, the reason for 40 days of being on the mountain in the first place is because he's writing down all of this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Moses is writing all this stuff. This book is being written on Mount Sinai in the presence, with right there. So that gives us a timeline of where the book is being written, number one. But two, Abraham observed it, and Isaac and Jacob. So if Abraham observed it, that means at least the information was being told. So we don't have anything specifically telling us whether Shem did or did not at this point. However, we do have the example of Abraham observing it. So going down that timeline, the information has at least been passed down. So it's not like they just completely said, okay, all the stuff that Noah said, we're going to get rid of that. Right? So I don't know. Maybe Shem did, maybe Shem didn't. I don't know.
Yeah. It's just some food for thought with that one, because if he basically dropped that, then that role, he's no longer being able to operate in that role of high priest. Right. You don't get to pick and choose, of course, what you want to do.
Right.
But here's the other question, guys. Why did the children forget? Maybe a little thing like being in captivity for, 100 and something years. We look at the totalness. Again, we're going, when we go back to the Septuagint and Masoretic texts, and there's some differencing on timelines. The children of Israel were definitely in captivity for a long enough time in the land of Mitzrayim, aka Egypt, that a lot of these things that they were losing, a lot of this was orally taught. And so for a lot of them, they spent enough time in Egypt that they were forgetting these things. And so that's why when Abba's like pulling Moshe up to the mountain, he's like, hey, I get it. God's like, I'm not mad at anybody because these are things that have been lost. But so now, Moshe, you're going to write these things down, because when we go to verse 20, it says, and do thou command the children of Israel to observe this festivals in all their generations for a commandment unto them. One day in the year, in this month, they shall celebrate the festival. For in verse 21 says, for it is the feast of weeks and the feast of first fruits. This feast is twofold and of a double nature, according to what is written and engraven concerning it. Celebrate it. So when I see that word engraven there, it kind of makes me think this is something literally engraven, like it's in stone, so to speak. Written and it says what is written and engraven. In verse 21, it says what is written and engraven concerning it, celebrate it. So I was saying, hey, I know I'm gonna hold you. I'll only hold you accountable for what you know, but now I'm letting you know, and now that you know, you need to celebrate it, period.
Well, let's just look at verse 18, the very beginning of it. It says, and this whole festival was celebrated in heaven from the day of creation till the days of Noah 26 Jubilees. So it's giving you already timeline. This is already happening before the first words were spoken, before it was said to Moses at all, before it was said to Noah or anybody else who may have tried to celebrate this. This was already happening in heaven. Right. And I think that's what's really interesting and amazing about all this stuff is God's not just throwing out random stuff for random people at random times. You know, he's not like, oh, for the Hebrew Jewish people, they do this thing. And then the modern day Christian people, they do this thing. And then before the flood, they did this thing. And then, well, while you're in Egypt, you can do whatever you want because you're in captivity. It's like, no. This has been celebrated in heaven, and they do that every single year. And we're just trying to match it and emulate it as best as we can and be prepared for when it comes to us, because it's coming down to where then we will all get to do it together. And, you know, again, like the Father, like him setting us up for success, he's saying, I'm going to let you practice and practice and practice. And, you know, when we were all growing up, all of us who played sports or anything, what does practice make? Practice makes perfect, right? And he's saying, what is the goal of life? For us to be perfected, sanctification. So we're trying to perfect the things of heaven. We're trying to perfect the things of earth. We're never going to get there in and of our own nature, but with the Father, with the Holy Spirit, through Jesus, we have that opportunity to be perfected and to celebrate these things perfectly and to understand them in a manner that when it's shown to us, we'll be able to do them. So it's just crazy awesome that it's already happening in heaven, and he's not just making stuff up for the sake of making stuff up.
And it's amazing. I love that you brought that up, Jonathan, because in verse 18, when it says, hey, by the way, when creation first started, this was happening. Let's read that again. Let's pull it right up. It says, and this whole festival was celebrated in heaven from the day of creation till the days of Noah, 26 Jubilees and 5 weeks of years. That's amazing. And I think that's so important. You know, as part of Yeshua's prayer, they say, hey, Rabbi, teach us to pray. What does he say? On earth as it is in heaven.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? So God's like, hey, there's nothing, when he says there's nothing new under the sun, there's nothing new under anything. He says, we were already doing it. And now I just want you to emulate what we've been doing here on earth. That's and be a part of it. Because here's the thing that I love about this, guys, with our Abba, is he is in the family business. He's in the family business. People ask, why does he do this? And why does he do that? Why did he create angels? Why? Hey, look, he created all these things, and we're all a part of this family. Though we're not necessarily in that realm together yet, because all that's coming to us. But what I love is Abba's in the family business. By the way, you mean so much to me that the things that we are celebrating in the heavenly realms, I want you to be a part of it. I want you, when we're doing these feasts and festivals, it's not just to do it, ladies and gentlemen. It's not just to say, okay, we did it, let's mark it off. We did our Pesach, we did our Shavuot, you know, we did all these different things going all the way to the end till we get to Sukkot. That's it, sorry. But all the way to Sukkot, he's like, all these things is reminders of what's already taken place in the heavenlies. Yep. And I want y'all to be a part of this. And Abba's, matter of fact, Abba, his promise to us is when we do these things, I'm going to be there with you. My presence will be there with you while we're celebrating these. That's why every Shabbat to me is so special and so important that I've said this from the front of the pulpit, so to speak, that Shabbat isn't about just not working. It's not just about taking the day off from what you do throughout the week. It's actually about a spiritual rest. It's about a connection with our Heavenly Father that goes way deeper than just kicking back and going, yeah, we ain't got to do no work today. We're all good. You know, let's just be lazy or whatever. Just go read some scriptures and hang out. There's a deeper meaning because Abba's like, on this day, I said, this is a feast day, right? We've talked about this. We're supposed to eat on Shabbat. It's a feast day. So Abba's saying, I will be with you on every Shabbat. Not that he's not with us, right, guys, the rest of the week, but he's saying these are special days set aside from creation as remembrance to what's taking place.
So, hey, guys, next time we are going to do a quick little recap, and then we'll get started in the second part of Chapter 6 in the Book of Jubilees. So until next time, God bless.
Shalom.